Good morning, everybody. You're watching our mid-morning edition of Arirang News on this Thursday, July 23rd, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Shin Se-min. Before we get started, these are the stories we're following at the top of the hour. The South Korean economy drops 3.3% on quarter in Q2, the hardest drop in 22 years, as COVID-19 pandemic slams exports and private consumption. The nation's top economic policymaker says external factors might have also played a greater role in the worse than expected figures. More to come. U.S. President Donald Trump says he doesn't rule out closing more Chinese diplomatic missions after the State Department orders China to close its Houston consulate, further ratcheting up tensions between the two superpowers. What could have been the first M&A between South Korean airlines has been dropped completely. The deal between Jeju Air and Eastar Airlines crumbled due to the industry's mounting pandemic-induced losses. It's the first technical recession since the year of 2003. South Korea's gross domestic product dropped by 3.3% in the Q2, posting negative growth for the two consecutive quarters in a row as exports plunged amid COVID-19 pandemic. It's also the biggest setback since the Asian financial crisis. For more on this, we connect to our Yoon Jung-min, our economic correspondent, for the details. Jung-min, tell us more.
Sure, Simon. The Bank of Korea said this morning that the country's second quarter GDP fell by 3.3% on quarter. This is the biggest decline since the first quarter of 1998, when South Korea's economy contracted by over 6% amid the Asian financial crisis. On year, the economy contracted by 2.9%, which is also the lowest in over 2 decades. Real gross domestic income also fell 2% on quarter. South Korea's exports tumbled over 16%, the biggest decline in over 5 decades. Exports of automobile and petroleum products continue to fall as COVID-19 hammered global trade. Imports also fell more than 7%. And investment in construction and facilities was down. The manufacturing sector dropped 9%, while the agriculture sector plunged 9.7%. Private consumption, however, was up 1.4%. This was thanks to the COVID-19 relief funds and lower consumption tax rate on cars.
And Jung-min, the nation's finance minister gave out his response moments after the BOK's growth release. Tell us more.
Right. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said this morning that the performance during the second quarter was worse than expected. He said it was mainly due to external shocks, despite a pickup in the private consumption. Hong added that if South Korea continues to keep the COVID-19 situation in check, it will see a rebound in the third quarter. The finance minister said the recovery in the third quarter would largely depend on the effects of the supplementary budget, its ambitious Korea New Deal project, and the reopening of social economic activities. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Semin.
That was our Yoon Jung-min with the nation's economic growth for the second quarter. Thank you. What was to be the first ever M&A between two South Korean airlines has been scrapped as Jeju Air and Estar Jet failed to set the deal. Now, Jeju Air has demanded that Eastar pay off all of its debt, but Eastar failed to do that as the losses by the COVID-19 pandemic. Our Oh Jung-hee with more.
South Korea's biggest low-cost carrier, Jeju Air, has scrapped its plan to acquire Eastar Jet. Jeju Air officially made the announcement on Thursday and explained that COVID-19 pandemic-related uncertainties remain high. The company is known to have notified Eastar on Wednesday. Their M&A deal drew a lot of attention as it was supposed to be the first M&A between two South Korean airlines. But the deal broke down as Eastar failed to meet Jeju Air's request to pay off all of its debt, citing losses caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Jeju Air signed a deal to acquire a 51% stake in Estar Jet back in March. It was to complete the deal by June 29th and issue $8.3 million worth of bonds on June 30th, which could later be turned into equities. But the bond issuance was delayed as Jeju Air demanded Eastar get rid of its debt of nearly $83 million by July 15th. The debts include unpaid wages to employees, delayed payments to subcontractors, and office operating expenses. Eastar responded that it can't because it has suspended flights since March, and the debt payment was not part of the share purchase agreement in the first place. South Korea's transport ministry tried to mediate, offering to provide financial assistance if the two sides seal the deal. But Jeju Air was cautious throughout, as acquiring Eastar may cause bigger financial problems. As the deal is scrapped, it's forecast that cash-strapped Eastar will file for bankruptcy. The airline industry expects it's more probable that Eastar will be liquidated rather than rehabilitated. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
And that is a development on coronavirus pandemic. With the high number of COVID-19 cases in the country of Iraq, the South Korean government has sent 2 military aircraft to bring back its nationals who have been working as construction workers in the Middle Eastern country. Almost 300 people will be arriving home on Friday morning. Our Eastar Jet with more.
105 South Korean construction workers arrived back home last week from Iraq. Of them, more than 40 have COVID-19. With Iraq dealing with thousands of new infections each day, the South Korean government has decided to bring back more of its nationals from the country. On Friday, 297 South Koreans will arrive at Incheon International Airport on 2 military planes laid on by the government. Of those returning, the body of 1 South Korean worker who died from COVID-19. Before the South Koreans boarded the aircraft, they were thoroughly tested for COVID-19 and will be seated accordingly.
To prevent in-flight infection, the infected and non-infected will be separated, and flights will be at 60% capacity.
Upon their arrival, all of them will be tested again. Those who have COVID-19 will be transferred to a treatment facility, while those who test negative will be whisked off to a temporary living facility. Medical personnel have been stationed in those temporary living facilities, and their health status will be checked around the clock for 2 weeks. However, with hundreds of essential workers still in Iraq, unable to return, the South Korean government plans to provide them with remote healthcare services. Eastar Jet, Arirang News.
A WHO expert says that while researchers are making good progress developing COVID-19 vaccines and a number of trials are underway, the first use of COVID-19 vaccine will not be ready until early 2021. Speaking at a public event on social media, Mike Ryan, the head of WHO's emergencies program, said several vaccines are now in phase 3 trials and none had failed in terms of safety or immunity response. But he added that it'll be the first part of next year before we see vaccinations happen for real. He also said the WHO is working to ensure everybody gets a fair access to the potential vaccine and help scale up production capacity. The United States has abruptly ordered China to cease all operations and events at its consulate in Houston by Friday afternoon local time, in a move that's certain to erode the already sour relations between the world's 2 superpowers. And the U.S. President Donald Trump also hinted that other Chinese diplomatic missions in the U.S. could also face similar orders. Our Kim Hyo-sun reports.
After the U.S. ordered China to close its consulate in Houston, Texas by 4 p.m. Friday, providing just 72 hours notice, President Trump said his administration could do the same to other Chinese diplomatic missions to the U.S. in the days, weeks, and months to come.
Thank you very much. As far as closing additional embassies, it's always possible. You see what's going on. We thought there was a fire in the one that we did close, and everybody said there's a fire, and I guess they were burning documents or burning papers, and I wonder what that's all about.
The remark, which came following a question during a COVID-19 press briefing Wednesday, adds to the rapidly escalating tensions between the U.S. and China. Washington's top diplomat Mike Pompeo explained the latest decision was taken because Beijing was, quote, stealing intellectual property. China's foreign ministry condemned the move, saying the measure breaches international law.
The decision is a unilateral political provocation made by the United States, which seriously violates international law, basic norms of international relations. The U.S. side is deliberately sabotaging China-U.S. relations, which is unreasonable.
The Houston consulate was the first Chinese Consulate-General to be opened in the U.S. in 1979 when the two countries established diplomatic relations. According to local media outlets, emergency services were called to the Houston consulate Tuesday evening after reports of several burning bins in the courtyard. The Houston police force, however, explained on Twitter that officers were not granted access while smoke continued to billow from the compound. The spokesperson for Beijing's foreign ministry did not comment in detail on the fire, but insisted it was nothing unusual. The U.S. measure comes on the heels of intensifying tensions between the world's two superpowers over issues of trade, the origin of COVID-19, as well as Beijing's new security law on Hong Kong. China's foreign ministry claims that U.S. authorities have been intimidating Chinese students in the U.S., with some even facing what it called groundless arrests. It urged Chinese students in the U.S. to take extra caution. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
The U.S. government has urged non-American companies to stop doing business with the Chinese tech giant Huawei. The U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary for Cyber and Communications, Robert Strayer, said South Korean companies like LG U+, a telecommunication firm, should shift away from unreliable suppliers and work with more trusted firms because of security issues with the Chinese government. However, Strayer added that Washington will not offer any economic incentives to tech companies that stop using Huawei's technology. Just last week, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo described other Korean telecom companies like SK and KT as clean companies and asked others to join the anti-Huawei campaign. South Korea's National Assembly is moments away from holding a confirmation hearing for Unification Minister nominee Lee In-young this morning. Now, the nominee's qualifications as well as his position on national security will be probed during the session, with the replacement coming at a testing time for inter-Korean relations. Now, the nominee had earlier proposed that small-scale trade or bartering between the two Koreas as a way to break the current impasse. Also at the National Assembly, lawmakers will be continuing their grilling of government officials on the topic of the economy. Lawmakers are set to target the administration's failed attempts to cool the overheated property market, as well as its revision to the country's tax code, which was announced on Wednesday.
Good morning. Heavy monsoon rain is falling across the country. In fact, heavy rain advisories have been issued in parts of Jeju and Jeollado provinces a couple of hours ago, and it's very likely that rain alerts will be expanded to more regions as the day goes along today. So 50 to 150 millimeters of showers are in store nationwide, while the south and east coast could see up to 250 millimeters of torrential rain into Saturday. Also, it's going to be quite windy along the south and west coast as well as Jeju Island. So plan accordingly and check in advance if you have travel plans. Along the west coast and the capital and surrounding regions as well as south coast, we'll see downpours from this afternoon into tomorrow dawn, while parts of the east coast will see torrential rain from tomorrow dawn. Temperatures, though, will remain on the cool side, 1 to 4 degrees lower than yesterday. Daytime highs will be ranging from 23 to 25 degrees Celsius this afternoon, while Jeju will be very warm at 31 degrees. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
And that does it for us at this hour on Arirang News, but we'll be back with more of the day's headlines coming up at noon Korea time, so stay close. Thanks for watching and goodbye for now.